Imagine having an opportunity to talk with some of the great heroes and great deceivers of Western civilization together in the same room. What would be the outcome of that conversation, and how would our modern day lives and practice of the faith be affected by that conversation? We'll talk about that tonight, so please stay with us. Thank you very much and welcome. First of all, I want to continue offering you our Christmas greetings because unlike a lot of folks who sort of stop at Christmas, you're really supposed to start celebrating on Christmas Day and have 12 days of Christmas. People are singing about it all the time before the 12 days start. Now we're in the 12 days of Christmas, and I hope you're having a wonderful celebration with your families and that you're enjoying this great time. Part of your enjoyment could also be to celebrate these holy days that we have today. For instance, is the feast of Saint John the Apostle and Evangelist. He's traditionally said to be born about 6 AD. That would place him somewhere in his 20s during the public ministry of our Lord Jesus. And that he lived to be well into his 90s, dying around the year 100 AD. And he has a combination of things in his gospel for you to look for. On one hand, the kind of conversations that are far more developed in St. John than they are in the other gospels shows the kind of intimacy of a close beloved friend. On the other hand, he also has a greater concern about real specific details, such as on the first day this happened, then this day this happened, next day this happened, and so on. He gives us that kind of detail, especially at the beginning and the end of our Lord's life. You do well to meditate deeply on this gospel, and of course continue to celebrate his feast at Mass and the feast of the other saints that we celebrate in this week of Christmas. Tonight we have a guest who is a political science professor at Franciscan University of Steubenville. He has studied how the thoughts of saints and scoundrels throughout the centuries have shaped our lives. So please welcome the host of EWTN series Saints versus Scoundrels and the author of the book by the same name, Dr. Benjamin Wiker. It is so great to see you again.
I'm so happy to be here.
Good.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you know we love it. Now, I in particular, because I've enjoyed so much the way that you bring insight into past characters who have affected our lives. I remember when we first did your book on Darwin. It was fascinating. And it's become something I've referred to many times because people know about his ideas on evolution with the origin of the species, but they don't know how, despite being such a nice man, he also had very racist ideas based on poor quality science. You know, his statements that blacks are a different species from human beings, in between apes and humans. That opened up, you know, an understanding of him and his impact on the modern world. And the other stuff that you've done here, your other books, but also your work in Saints and Scoundrels, I really enjoy because I like history. Gets me past my own life. Plus, the older you get, the more you start to realize,
I was there.
Yeah, I could have been there. Now, two things I want us to discuss. You've got a new series of Saints and Scoundrels.
Yes, we do.
And also, you've got another book out on the Reformation.
Yes.
And some of the things you think everybody still should know.
Yes.
Let's start off with the new series on Saints and Scoundrels first. Who is showing up on the program this year?
We have none other than Margaret Sanger, who is, of course, our scoundrel, going against Pope Paul VI. And, of course, you know, he is the great author of Humanae Vitae.
And himself now a blessed.
Now a blessed, and he deserves it.
beatified.
When I was researching him, I came to such a deep appreciation of this man. He really underwent a white martyrdom in his life. You know, he really faced so many hurdles, and not just in Humanae Vitae, but in so many other ways. You know, what a man. Facing down the fascists on the one hand, and the communists on the other hand in Italy. You know, just the burdens on this man are immense. But
And he's a good example of, if these are the kind of enemies that a man has, I like him better already.
Yeah, you can tell that. It's an honor to be, you know, in the same company with him, because, you know, if they hated him that much, he must have been on his way to sainthood.
Yeah.
But of course, now we're going against Margaret Sanger, who did everything she could, not only to push birth control and later abortion, but people don't know this, eugenics. And so that was the origin of her birth control movement, is eugenics, and that's, you know, it's not just Hitler, it's part of Planned Parenthood's past.
And it wasn't just eugenics. Did not Planned Parenthood cooperate with the Third Reich in their eugenics committee?
Well, you have, at the time, leading up to World War II, it's not just...
You're back in the 30s.
Yeah, you're back in the 30s, and even in the late 1800s, you know, the eugenics movement is really all over Europe, all over Germany, over England, over France.
Before you talk about how far it spread, what is eugenics?
It's just this. I mean, you take Darwin's principle, right? Survival of the fittest, right? Natural selection. All eugenics is artificial selection. Okay, so we want to eliminate, we human beings decide, well, that's the kind of human being we want. We want them blonde hair, blue-eyed, and 6'5". Or we don't want that. We don't want people with any disabilities. We don't want people with any problems at all. We want to eliminate them, so we're literally weeding them out, and that's the kind of language they use. These are weeds. These are the good things we want to keep. And Margaret Sanger's way of doing it was through birth control. You give the people that, well, you know, those people, we don't want them breeding. You give them birth control.
She was in particular concerned about Eastern Europeans, Southern Europeans, Hispanics, and especially African Americans. People of African descent of any kind. In some ways, she was living out Darwin's ideas
it came
in the Descent of Man, his
in the
second
Descent
book.
of Man, that's the one people should read, by the way. They get confused and they read The Origin of Species, and well, there's nothing about eugenics in that. What you have to read is second book. This was published in 1871, Descent of Man. That's when you're going to hit all the stuff that should make your hair raise and say, wow, did Darwin say that?
That's right.
And that just fed into, it spread all over Europe and America. So it wasn't just Germany involved in eugenics. This has been a part of American in the early 1900s and in all of Europe. And Margaret Sanger was essential to that. And one of her books, it was horribly eugenic, came out before Hitler's Mein Kampf. And that was the pivot of civilization. You know, and I've read students, you know, you can read them out of Margaret Sanger's Pivot of Civilization. They're thinking, well, you must be reading me out of Mein Kampf. And I say, no, Mein Kampf is much more mild than this. You know, it's just startling what she says in there.
Exactly. And this is something that I think to see her, and just so folks know, she also addressed the Ku Klux Klan Ladies Auxiliary meetings.
Wonderful meeting that was.
Yeah, 5 different years.
Yeah.
You know, there were 5 occasions where she spoke to them about eliminating blacks who are a weed that must be eradicated. That's her terminology.
Yeah, yeah, and it wasn't just races. It was, she was a big, she embraced the new IQ test and said, okay, if you're below that, well, you really shouldn't have been born, but whatever happens, please don't breed. You know, so she's pecking off at least 50% of the population is saying, I'm sorry, you know, you didn't make the grade and you shouldn't be allowed to breed. And she didn't have any problem with forced sterilization.
Which
either.
The federal government did on African Americans.
Yeah. And others too. So we
I
we
knew
have
about
something
the African Americans. I wasn't sure about the others.
Yeah, the forced sterilization programs in the South and in relationship to those who didn't make the intellectual grade, people make that decision, no, that's enough of you folks breeding. So you had forced sterilizations, quite a large number. I can't remember the actual number, but it's in the tens of thousands. It's not a couple here and there. In America.
Yep.
Yeah, in America.
And this is the on one hand, that's why you do this, you know, to see who these people are.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I know that they've been taking down statues of, you know, various leaders of the Confederacy, but some of the proponents of that support Planned Parenthood, and we have politicians who accept the Margaret Sanger Award. It's far worse than anything that General Lee ever did. When he was 22, he inherited some slaves and he set them free right away. He never owned slaves. You know, this where she tried to exterminate African Americans. This is a big difference. And seeing this kind of character and organization to whom hundreds of millions a year are given by the federal government.
Which means our tax dollars, by the way. It's not like the federal government is just giving it to them. They're taking it from us and giving it to them. That's even worse.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then you have Blessed Paul VI.
Yeah.
Seeing that contrast. Was he ever associated with any kind of support for the Third Reich?
Well, people would like to see that. But when you actually read about his life, what you find is here is a man hemmed in on all sides by fascists in Italy. You know, they're literally, when he was a young priest.
That was the government of Mussolini.
Yeah, beating up you know, he's taking care of his flock and they're beating them up. You know, so he actually had run-ins with fascists. And on the other side, you've got communists, and then you've got the Nazis coming in later who take over Italy. And in all these cases, he is trying to make the best situation he can for the people he's trying to protect. And so you say, well, he should have just stood up in the square and, you know, fought the Nazis himself with a sword, gotten out of the Vatican. Well, yes, and then what would happen, immediately you would have a group murdered to show you why you don't do that. So he's protecting as many people as he can very bravely. And it's not just the Nazis, it's the communists, it's the fascists, it's all these things piling on him. And, you know, what kind of shoulders could bear that? I don't know how he made it through. I don't know how.
This is where I think it's key to see that only when somebody such as Montini, which is his name, you know, by birth, was, you know, had clear Catholic principles that were more important than anything in politics. That's the only way you can do that. You have clarity about what is wrong and what is right. And that fascism in power, Nazism in power, or communism trying to get in power are still all wrong.
All wrong. Yeah, but you still have to deal with this concrete situation. How am I going to protect my flock in this mess? And you know, it was just amazing the kind of foresight and the insight that he had, but above all, the courage. And that same courage manifested itself in saying, okay, we're not going to jump on the birth control bandwagon because we believe it's going to destroy the sexuality that God has given us. And he's a prophet. He's, here's Margaret Sanger going that way. We're going this way. Pope Paul VI was a prophet. Look what's happened to sexuality.
Wasn't it Margaret Sanger who instigated Mrs. McCormick to finance the research for the birth control pill?
You have all kinds of connections between Planned Parenthood and research for the birth control pill. This is the magic bullet right here. This makes it all, so no one can reject it. And of course, they didn't know all the things that were going to happen that were bad from that. But you find a lot of research money behind the scenes from big donors, everyone from Ford Foundation to the McCormicks. There's big money behind there that has been pushing all through the 1900s and into this century, pushing the birth control, reduction of population. So it's one big movement, and almost all the time you find big money behind it. Manipulating research, as you say, and funneling it into foundations like Planned Parenthood to spread that kind of gospel of death.
And even one of the things that is amazing to me, because there's one thing to look at a theory, and then there's another thing to look at the actual results.
Yeah.
A classic example would be with the birth control pill.
Yeah.
That it became readily available after the testing and stuff through the 60s. It became readily available for prescriptions in the early 70s. And they can track the sale of it. I mean, the sale of the pill goes right up. And what's interesting, according to the Center for Disease Control, U.S. government, CDC, that the curve for the sale of the pill and of the condoms follows the exact same curve as the increase of abortions in the 70s to the present, and the same curve as the increase of sexually transmitted diseases, and the same curve as the increase of childbearing out of wedlock.
Yeah. And divorce, don't forget that part of the curve.
Well, the CDC didn't show that. I didn't see that.
But it's true.
Yeah, it's true.
Follows the same
But I'm
curve.
just following what the CDC in terms of things that they measure. So that the more pills and condoms are sold, the more people are getting sexually transmitted diseases and babies that they didn't expect.
Yeah. And the more destruction there are in the families.
Well, that's the result. Again, that's where we can come in. But the CDC looks at the and so you say, it's not working by your own stated goals.
Yeah, exactly. It's a disaster on your
our
terms.
goals of family stability.
Yeah.
That's what Paul VI was absolutely right on.
He was in a complete prophet of how this will turn out to be a disaster. In fact, when I teach him in class, I say he underestimated the destruction because it's far worse. I mean, maybe if he had seen that, he probably would have just crumpled, seen what has actually happened.
That's right.
So it's been a horrifying failure, including the demographic collapse of a whole lot of nations.
Exactly.
Which isn't fun in Europe if you've got a large influx of Islamic populations to have a demographic collapse.
Or if you have a demographic collapse in China.
In China.
Where there are, they don't know exact, I haven't seen the precise numbers, but it's somewhere close to 50 million men for whom there's no woman to marry.
Yeah.
And in India, it's 46 million. They have a better statistic.
Yeah.
It's 46 million men.
Yeah. Oh, it's grossly distorted.
There's no woman to marry because they aborted the girls.
And that
in both cultures.
That causes a rise in pornography, a rise in prostitution, a rise in sexual trafficking.
Yeah, or what we would normally call sexual slavery.
Sexual slavery, yeah. It never turns out well. Every bad indication happens when you take out that natural sex selection ratio. It should be, about even, right?
Right.
And the introduction of abortion on demand and being able to find out the sex before birth, along with, using birth control, distorted in all those countries.
Yep.
And they're all experiencing, horrible things in some of the eastern areas. They're snatching, that's in Eastern Pacific Rim, they're snatching girl babies from other places. You're literally taking them. You're afraid to go outside. You're kidnapping. You're afraid to go outside with your stroller because your child will be snatched. Some parents are literally growing daughters because they're so there's such a high demand in the market. And you can tell in some areas who has done that, because why? They'll have appliances. They'll have luxuries that other people don't have. There's only one reason for it, because there's nothing else in the economy there except selling your daughter.
Yeah. These are the realities that you don't see on the news. And from what I understand, some of the search engines don't even allow you to find out some of this information.
What? There's no freedom in the press on there?
I'm sorry.
How could that happen?
I know it.
Yeah, I think there was something about the manipulation of the media that I remember in John Paul II's Gospel of Life. He warned about that.
Well, and this is going to be a very important series. And did you do any other saints and sinners?
Well, we have done a very jolly one with none other than G.K. Chesterton, and of course he's our saint. And then we've got Thomas Hobbes, the arch materialist and atheist, together, and they're battling heads right now.
Yeah, he's from the 1700s.
He is from the 1700s.
You also did Thomas More and Henry VIII?
Thomas More and Henry VIII, and we've done Jean-Jacques Rousseau versus St. Augustine, and we've done Flannery O'Connor versus Ayn Rand. That was a really good one.
Yeah.
Who else do we have?
Let's take a quick look.
You have? Okay.
Yeah, we have a clip.
Who do we have?
We have St. Thomas More dialoguing with King Henry VIII, his Lord Sovereign. Let's take a quick look.
You remember, I know you do, Your Highness, when you first asked me to enter into your service, when there was no one else there to witness our private conversation but your grace, myself, and our God. You assured me then at my most earnest request that I should look to God first and then to you, and that is the promise upon which I made my oath of loyalty to be your chancellor. And that is why I cannot swear an oath that goes against my first. I cannot swear allegiance to an act of parliament that declares you supreme head of church, for such is directly repugnant to the laws of God in his holy church, a supreme government by which may no temporal prince presume by any law to take upon him as rightfully belonging to the see of Rome, a spiritual preeminence given by the mouth of our Savior himself.
Thomas.
Personally present upon this earth to St. Peter and his successors, bishops of the same see.
And is that how you speak to your king?
I speak freely because I now realize that I have one end to accomplish, and that is to serve God first, King of Kings, and do so until my last, however long that last may be, and may God make it last not much longer.
Not bad, huh?
That was well done.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And one of my favorite movies is A Man for All Seasons. You see some of the same ideas in a different setting put out, but this gets at that tension.
Yeah, the deep tension. And the question is, could Henry have been saved if More could have been taken out of the tower, get rid of all the people around the king, and bring them together again so they could try to renew their friendship? So in the Saints versus Scoundrels, sometimes people from the same time or different times, but can we have any effect on the scoundrel? Can the saint make a difference? What would it be like, say, if St. Francis met Niccolo Machiavelli? That was another one of ours. You bring them together, and then you can explore what they chose to do, what they didn't do, and could it have been different? What would have happened if More had convinced Henry VIII not to break from Rome?
Had Henry not overturned the power of the church so he could give himself leadership of the church in England and his nobles the lands of the church, they would have had a different system. You know, even the reality of the poorhouses described so vividly in Charles Dickens' novels only came into existence because by confiscating the lands of the church, who had been taking care of the poor, the state took over and did a lousy job.
Yeah. They took the lands, and really those were to pay off the nobles. And the poor, well, as they say, shift for themselves.
Yep. Yep. Well, and eventually, again, in the workhouses.
Yeah.
This is, something that, not to mention what Henry didn't know, by destroying the Benedictines in England, who had discovered the secret of making steel. He would have had an economic and technological advantage over everyone in Europe that no one else would. But he destroyed the foundry where they discovered it and the men who knew how to do it.
Yeah.
It's what he undid him. I always think of people who do evil through the lens of the legion of demons who were cast out by our Savior Jesus into the herd of pigs, who then drove the pigs over the cliff into the lake. Evil is, when it gets its way, becomes as self-destructive as those demons in the pigs.
Yeah.
And we see that constantly.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that shift, that decision that Henry made to break, that actually ushered in the thought of Machiavelli into England. And Machiavelli's works actually...
and this is Niccolo Machiavelli.
This is Machiavelli, yeah. The great teacher of evil became, in a way, the foundation of state policy. Well, you can't bring Machiavelli, the great teacher of evil, into your state policy and not become evil. And so I think a great darkness settled on England, and it became in many ways the foundation of a deep atheism. People don't realize that there's atheism in the 1400s and the 1500s, especially in Italy, spreads out over Europe clandestinely. That little funnel going over to England can make sense of why atheism had such a firm grasp in England so early, really in the early 1600s. You find it.
That's where Thomas Hobbes,
that's where Hobbes comes in.
That
exactly.
you are dealing with. Who he's the one who, as far as I can tell, he came up with the thought that religion is the biggest cause of war.
At least, yeah, and well, in the sense of he's actually taking over the thought of and transforming it of Lucretius, the first century BC Roman Epicurean, who blames religion for everything, including war. So that, if we didn't have religion, then people wouldn't have anything to fight about. But of course, in the context of the 1600s, well, Hobbes' Leviathan is 1651, and you just gotten the 30 Years' War over with.
Right, that had just ended in what, 1648?
And then you had the English Civil Wars going on in the middle of the 1600s.
Which is between Puritans and Anglicans.
Puritan Anglicans and Catholics thrown in there, some Anabaptists, some Quakers. There's a big mix, melding pot of civil destruction. And Hobbes is sitting in the midst of this, and his conclusion was, well, if we just get religion entirely under the power of the king, then he can control it. And of course, we know that God doesn't exist, but we need it to control, the lowlifes. So you basically have an atheist sovereign using religion, a malformed form of Christianity, as an instrument to control the people for political purposes in England.
And once that idea that religion is the biggest cause of war gets picked up again from Lucretius through Hobbes, who had a big impact.
Big impact. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He's still read in philosophy class.
He is certainly in mine.
Yeah. And sometimes more favorably than you present him.
I'm sure of that. I couldn't be less favorably.
Yeah. But, that showed up. And as I keep bringing out to audiences when I lecture around, that the removal of religion led to the far greater devastation of war for secular reasons, and especially atheism.
Yeah, absolutely. The body count between what was been done by atheism and nationalism is so far beyond whatever was caused by Christianity. And then when you look at the 30 Years' War anyway, and I do that in the other book you mentioned, the Reformation book, Well, what really was the 30 Years' War? Well, when you find out, wait a second, a lot of the carnage of the 30 Years' War had to do with nationalism.
It was dynastic.
It was dynastic fights, you know, and they'll use religion, but you know it's not religion when Catholics are siding with Lutherans to get other Catholics, and Lutherans are siding with Catholics to go after Calvinists, and Calvinists are siding with Catholics to go after, you know, it's like, what is this? It doesn't seem to have anything to do with religion.
Nothing.
It's
Nothing.
politics.
Exactly.
It's politics. So
Exactly.
it was really not the first religious war, it was the first national war.
Nationalistic.
It's nationalism, yeah.
Yeah, and I would I always point out to our audience, we're going to take a break, but I'd like to point out at the University of Hawaii's website, it's hawaii.edu/powerkills. They list the number of people who died in religious wars of Christianity, and they put it at 2.65 million. I investigated some of the specifics, and that was too high.
Yeah, that
They
is
were
too high.
it's closer to 2 to 2.25 million over the last 2,000 years. While up until 1900, it was 110 million who died in secular wars. And in the 20th century, between 1914 and 2000, it was 305 million.
Yeah, there's no comparison. There's not even a ratio almost. You say it's too small.
All right,
Yeah.
well, we have to take a break. We want to talk about your book that you just did on the Reformation. How many things do we have to know about it that we
This
don't
time
know?
12. I used
12.
to do 12.
Okay, we're going to work on 12 things that we don't know that we need to know. So please stay with us. We are talking to Dr. Benjamin Wiker. If you want to find out more about what he does, you go to his website at benjaminwiker.com. And one of the things I did this year was read your book, The Reformation 500 Years Later. I did one of those blurbs, which I enjoyed doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's good. And, you know, just, what is it now, 5-6 weeks ago? No, almost 2 months now.
Yeah, it'd be 2 months.
Yeah, almost 2 months. Time goes quickly. We celebrated the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther doing the kickoff for the Reformation by nailing his 95 Theses on the door of the church at Wittenberg. And so this is, you know, one of those great anniversaries. And they celebrated the 400th anniversary really well by publishing all of Luther's works. The Lutherans did both. There was a German edition, and then there also was an English edition of the Lutherwerke.
Correct.
But you know, it's a different era, and I don't think the promotion of Luther is quite as strong right now. In your book, you bring up a lot of interesting things about Luther and the other reformers. One of the oddest, among many.
Among many.
That's why we like books. It seems odd because it doesn't fit our regular
That's
narrative.
right. Oh, yeah. Wow. Where did that
Because
come
you
from?
start coming up with more facts. What is the link between the Reformation and Islam?
Yeah, that's something that nobody seems to focus on?
I got to say at the outset, as I was studying Luther and the Reformers back in the early 70s as a scholastic, studying theology, I kept thinking to myself, it sounds like Muslim thought, and I couldn't. I shouldn't figure out, because nobody would make that link. But the lack of free will of humans, God's will is absolute. I said, this sounds like Muslim thought. What did you discover?
Well, there is this connection when you go back. I think you can really trace it back to Occam, and there must be some
William of
Occam in the early 1300s.
An English Franciscan.
Yeah. And he was so exasperated, we'll say that, with philosophers, followers of Aristotle, who thought reason could replace revelation, that he thought, well, I'll do a turnaround on him. I'll show that reason is utterly impotent to know anything. And so he came up with this philosophy, nominalism, that brought that about. But he was stressing the power of God. The power of God is so far beyond what we can imagine, said Occam, that is not amenable to rationality at all. So God could have commanded us to kill our fathers rather than to honor our fathers. And to kill your father would then be meritorious in what you should do, because God commanded it. So, or if, even about the incarnation, he said Christ could have become incarnate as a block of wood. There's nothing special about him having become, a Jewish carpenter. That didn't really have anything to do with it, because if it did, then there would be a way to sort of rationally say something about theology. Well, God could have done anything. His power is so absolute, we have no connection to it. And that sounds like Islam. Islam.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't reason about it.
In Islamic theology, it is considered blasphemous to say that God must remain logical.
Yeah.
And even within the Quran, you'll see contradictions, and they usually resolve it by the last thing that God says on a topic is authoritative. But you cannot, when in Surah 5, I think it is, or 2, that there's no argument in religion. But then later on, there are verses that call people to try to kill along the path of God, like in Surah 61, verse 4. And other verses. You can't make God fit our logic.
No,
God is
not
greater
at all.
than our logic.
No.
And that's William of Occam as well.
That's William of Occam, yeah. And interesting enough, Occam's thought spread over Europe. And it spread and came around to Germany, and that's where Luther went to get his university education. So he got his education among the nominalists.
Nominalism is the school of philosophy.
Of William of Occam. Yes.
Okay.
And so it would make sense that he would stress the absolute power of God in such a way that had no connection to anything that human beings could do. So you couldn't justify yourself by works, and nor could you reason about it. And so you simply just have to have faith in what has been revealed. And what has been revealed, of course, is that you're justified by faith alone. So you really actually don't need, why do you need the sacraments? And Luther wasn't really able to make clear. And so other reformers said, well, I don't think we need the sacraments if it's justification by faith alone. It's not justification by faith alone plus baptism. It's just justification by faith alone. So he got into fights with other reformers who took his logic to its completion.
Right.
And suddenly, there's only justification by faith alone. There's no rational connection. You really can't make a theology out of that.
And that was especially true in regard to the Eucharist.
Absolutely.
The varying attempts to hold on to the Eucharist in that system of thought that God is so absolute that he can't be limited to a sacrament that could give grace. And so therefore, a variety of interpretation, that's what split him and Huldreich Zwingli.
Yeah. Right away. Yeah, and it happened. It didn't happen, 50 years, 100 years later.
No, that was 1529.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, and within 3 or 4 years, there were people among Luther's followers. One was Andreas von Karlstadt.
Yes, yeah.
And Karlstadt pretty much said, look, Luther, we don't need any sacraments.
That's right.
And the so-called Zwickau prophets who came over to Wittenberg, where Luther had vacated, but Luther actually had to come back to Wittenberg and clear these guys out. And they were biblical scholars, and he's saying to them, "You came up with the wrong conclusion." And so now he's got, he's calling Catholics Satan on the one side, and he's calling fellow reformers Satan on the other. And as you point out, one of the reasons he's calling them of Satan is that they throw out the Eucharist. They throw out baptism, and especially infant baptism. And then you have a wave of iconoclasm. And there's this, which means the destruction of all images.
Yeah.
Because
like we have the word cataclysmic, that is destruction. Iconoclasm is destruction of images.
Icons or images, yeah. And so that sweeps all over Europe. And the reason is because Andreas von Karlstadt read the Old Testament, and unlike Luther, he said, well, it's right here. Look, I'm reading the Ten Commandments. What do you do with idols? You smash them, and then you kill the people that had them. So there is a wave of really destructive iconoclasm all over Europe, and the princes are looking at Luther, and Luther's saying, "Hey, I don't know, these people are going nuts." And so he actually uses the state, the power of the state and the princes, to rein in the other reformers who had taken his principles and done things that he thought, no, you don't want to do that. But he couldn't come up with a way to you made the wrong move. Well, then, because their response was, as scriptural scholars, but look, we got it from Scripture alone.
Mm-hmm. And but see, we can see that we can trace these thoughts back to William of Ockham.
Mm-hmm.
But how does, and we can see that that's like Islam. What's the connection with Islam? Is there any direct connection?
Well, here's an interesting thing. This is one of the things I threw out in the book, and I haven't yet met anyone, of course, other than you. I know you would know this. But Luther actually made sure that a copy of the Quran was translated into German, and he wrote the preface to it. You say, whoa, what was he doing that for? Because Islam at the time was the most serious thing threatening Europe. And the Reformation was like a subtext. This is Islam was literally poised to pour over the borders into Europe.
Well, at the time of Luther writing, the Turks, the Ottoman Turks,
yeah,
they had already conquered Constantinople, the capital of Christianity in the East.
Yes.
And then that happened in 1453.
Yeah.
And then you see at Luther's time, they are invading Hungary.
Yeah, they are. They're going into Europe.
Yeah, Tomasz Hunyadi is trying to prevent that. And the Pope is telling the European princes, we got to stop the Turkish invasion.
Yeah.
And here, who's Luther?
Who's this guy? Doesn't he understand?
We got this big problem over here. And that was one of the reasons Pope Leo the Tenth, Pope Leo the Tenth was distracted, as was Julius II earlier.
Yeah.
This was
and the emperor was distracted too, because the emperor had to go over to the eastern part of Europe, and he couldn't take care of what was going on in Germany, and that gave sort of Luther some room to breathe.
Right.
And a lot of people point out, well, if Islam wasn't threatening, then the emperor would have come right into Germany. And that would have remained, it might have remained a Reformation with a small r rather than a capital R.
Mm-hmm.
We'll take seriously there needs to be reform, but not the splintering of Christianity.
Right.
Yeah, but the emperor couldn't do anything. He had to take care of the Muslim invasion.
See, there are two issues taking place, I think, in the Reformation. One, there certainly was a fair amount of corruption in the sense that, especially when the papacy had been in France, they learned more efficient ways to raise money for the church. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of money pouring into the church, into Italy, coming from Germany.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Especially from Germany was the economic engine back then too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In other countries, another kind of reformation was taking place. There was a purification and a reformation already done. They didn't have that kind of corruption in Spain.
Mm-hmm. No, they didn't.
And France was a mixed bag, but not that bad. Mm-hmm. England was in pretty good shape.
Prior to Henry VIII, yes.
Prior to
Henry VIII, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the church in England was not filled with that corruption in England. You know, there'd be problem people here there, but it wasn't thorough corruption. The axis between Italy and Germany was where the real corruption was.
Yeah.
That had to be cleaned up.
Absolutely, yeah.
That had to be addressed.
Yeah.
But the other issue is this introduction of philosophy by William of Ockham, who was using, in some ways, Muslim commentators, right?
Yeah, well, you have that connection where the stress on the absolute power of God, and when Luther's reading the Quran, you know, some of that, in that sense, is ringing true to them. But he also thinks of the Quran as showing, interesting enough, look how good the Muslims are in comparison to us. That shows you why works don't save you. So he's actually holding up the Muslims and saying, look how much better they are than we are. But that doesn't mean anything to us because we're saved by faith alone. But if you read the Muslims, they're a lot like Catholics, except they're better. So he was actually showing them, here, these are better than Catholics, and they show you why Catholics are hopelessly corrupt. And Calvin later uses that same kind of thing, showing, hey, Muslims are better than Catholics. Catholics are the low person on the totem pole. At least they have a ceremony and a moral tradition. But hey, we know that it doesn't save you. But we never thought any of that could save you. Right. And so he can wash away Catholics and Muslims at the same time. But Luther believed that Muslim invasion would signal the end of the world. He didn't believe we'd be here discussing 500 years later.
That's exactly right.
Anything. He thought, they're coming in. This is just like having Babylonia come in or Assyria come in. God is using Islam as the rod of his punishment for Europe. And at one point he said, you can't fight against Islam because it's fighting against God.
That was one of the things too, especially when he, early on, I think by December of 1517 already, and certainly January of 1518, which is just weeks after.
It's really just
like right about
blink
this
of an
time
eye.
of year, compared to when he started the Reformation in November. He's calling the Pope Antichrist.
So and other things.
Among other things.
So we won't mention.
But he's playing out that end times sequence, that the Pope is the Antichrist, and the Muslims are the huge army coming from the east that you see in the book of Revelation.
Yeah, and the Pope is the Antichrist, and here I'm living in the last times, and so what you need to do is not think, well, what effect will this have the thing I'm starting now, what effect will it have in 50 years, 100 years?
There won't
think
be.
about it. You don't think, so he's not really thinking about what will happen. And as events unfold and the Reformation sort of spins out of control, that was a surprise to him. He thought, wait a second, I thought we'd be done by now.
Exactly.
Yes. But now the ramifications become clear, and he ends up throwing himself to the princes to say, protect me from the papacy, but also these other reformers are wrong. You got to clean them out. You got to clean them out, and that means that the church becomes, in a way, beholden to the German princes. And that's not a good place to be. You don't want to put yourself under the state and say, you guys take care of the problem.
This is, I don't know if you've read the book Church of Spies.
No.
Excellent book about the backroom deals that Pope Pius XII was doing to bring the war to an end. But in that, they make a point that the Lutherans in Germany had more trouble in thinking about overthrowing Hitler because they had inherited from Luther that sense, the prince is established by God.
Oh, yes.
And that was a bigger problem for them, while the Catholics, especially a number of the Jesuits, were saying, no, you can legitimately assassinate a tyrant or overthrow a tyrant who is acting unjustly. That would be a just act. And that was an argument between Bonhoeffer and others versus some of the Catholics. Catholics swayed them. But this was various thoughts that had ramifications hundreds of years later.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that became sort of Luther's steady drumbeat. You know, you give unto Caesar, give unto Caesar. And the reason is that things were out of control. And so he wanted, you know, Caesar, the passage is render unto Caesar, became like a mantra for him. You'd never reject the power of the prince. Well, during the Peasant War,
Yeah, which was what?
it's like in the 1530s, isn't it? I think during the Peasant War, or was it 1520s?
It's earlier, it's
Around the
1520s,
20s, yeah, because it happened much earlier. 1520s, it happened very quickly. The peasants, who were really middle class, they're not like down here. They're middle class landowners, like Luther's own family. They're saying, "You're treating us badly," and we're reading the Bible as Luther told us to, and we're all a priesthood of believers here, and Christ takes care of the poor.
And the Holy Spirit
Is moving
inspires
us,
us
yeah.
to interpret.
Yeah, and you're treating us this way. And look what it says about the rich. And so they, in a way, actually at the beginning, very politely said, okay, you know, help us out here. And as things got out of control, Luther began to be blamed because the peasants were causing all this carnage. And he said to the princes, wipe them out. Stab, kill, strangle, let God sort them out.
Yeah.
And after that, there was a large reaction against Lutheranism in the German principalities because they felt like they were sold out. Because all Luther cried was, obey the prince, he's put there by God, obey the prince. And it looked like, okay, well, what is Lutheranism but, you know, a tool of the prince to control the people that the prince wants to keep under control. And that's where that came from, that long habit of obedience to the state.
Right, and it's one of these things where, you know, we have to be, you know, very careful about these issues because we don't want to see revolution against the state as the norm, but neither is obedience to the state the norm. It is the norm set by God of His commandments, His virtue, His holiness, His goodness. That's the norm, and we have to call the state and the people to conform to God's norms of holiness and righteous commandments.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, I mean, we say obedience to the state, obedience to Caesar. What if Caesar saying abortion? What if Caesar says gay marriage? You know, what if Caesar says...
Oh, they do.
Yeah, they do. Oh, gosh, I guess I'm too late. Caesar has said that, and we actually, as Catholics, are commanded to disobey and commanded to try to, at first peacefully, you know, do everything you can to turn back things so they're in accord with the basics of the natural law.
And we grew up when the state would not let African Americans vote, and lots of other oppressive, you know, they couldn't live in the same places where white people lived. There was a lot, those were evil.
Yeah.
Those are evils. We had to stand up against them. Shouldn't have ever allowed it in the first place.
Yeah.
But this is where we have to critique the state when the state is wrong.
Yes.
According to God's norms.
Yeah, and stress the have to, not here's an option, you can do this if you want to. This becomes a moral obligation. Because and since you know what the right thing is, you can't be silent. And that's not so comfortable sometimes.
It's not, but this gets at one of the points of your Saints and Scoundrels series and of the books that you did on Darwin and the new atheists and on the Reformation and politicization of the Bible. You keep going at ideas that have great impact on the lives of the people who held them. And then on, even when they didn't live them out, they still had a big impact.
Oh yeah, they just live on and transform.
And it had a great impact on society. Your other book too, the one about the different the architects
of the culture
of death.
Yeah,
you know, it's we have to understand how these folks think.
Yes.
In order to take the ideas head on.
Yeah.
From the perspective of our faith.
Yeah, and you have to know them because a lot of people don't understand that they're actually being malformed and manipulated by ideas that came about 200, 300, 400 years ago and create a kind of a world that is deforming human souls every day. And if they don't see that, then they can't climb out of that.
Exactly.
They can't climb out of that. And that's, again, that's what we try to do with Saints versus Scoundrels. Here are the bad ideas, here's the bad way of life. What would the opposite have to say to it if they could meet?
Well, here's one of the things that we have to meet. This is the end of the show.
No, it can't be.
It is.
No,
it is.
no,
I know,
no.
I know it. But we want you to watch Saints versus Scoundrels, get the book and the DVD series, as well as the Dr. Wiker's great book, The Reformation, 500 Years Later, and all the books that he has at EWTNRC.com, or you can call them 1-800-854-6316. Almighty God bless you all and keep you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the 12 days of Christmas. Enjoy your family and each other well. Thank you.